Are you tired of using good cards? Do you want to be completely trashed every game you play? Well, I have just the thing for you. Introducing the Loser 9. I recently released my own version of the Power 9 for the Bakugan Pro TCG, and that was a lot of fun to do. But of course, after making the list, I started thinking about what the worst 9 cards are, and that's exactly what Loser 9 is all about. I'm sure this idea isn't new, and maybe the name isn't even unique, but originality is dead, and I'm here to beat the corpse with a stick. If I'm going to be honest, I rarely actually use meta decks or strategies, and much prefer using gimmick decks that usually end up with me getting my ass kicked. But even as someone who uses dumb decks, I can't even remotely recommend any of the cards on this list. And just like the Power 9 list, I try to include a variety of cards that are bad for different reasons. There are tons of cards that are only bad because of the energy cost, and that's not fun to make a list of. Also, I'm going to try to fix each of these cards to make them viable, which will hopefully be an interesting talking point. One last thing, I have a future video in mind that I need your help with. So in the comment section, let me know what you think the most underrated Bakugan is. Alright, let's get on to the list. Number 9, Mind Control. Mind Control is a very unique card, and it's a shame it's not good. It's a 5 cost Darkest Action card that lets you look at your opponent's hand and choose an action card from it to be played. You, of course, get the benefits of the card played. That doesn't sound bad, right? Maybe a bit pricey, but could be useful in some situations, I guess? Well, that would be the case, if not for how the game actually functions. See, your opponent always gets the opportunity to play a card in response to one of your cards, so they could always just play their best card from their hand before Mind Control even goes off. Of course, if your opponent has a huge hand and has tons of good cards, you'll most likely get to pick something decent, but it's pretty rare. It's also rare that your opponent has a card that'll be worth your energy spent, since most good action cards are cheap, though there is some worth in getting that action card out of your opponent's hand. It's not great and pretty situational, but can be helpful sometimes, which is why it's only number 9. The way I would fix it is by making it 3 cost, but instead of any action card, I would limit it by saying only action cards that are 5 energy or less in cost. So it's cheaper to play, but has limits. Less risky, and you can play it earlier. If we want to make it even better, I would suggest making it a 4 cost and letting you pick any non-flip card, while still keeping the 5 cost and under limit. Imagine clearing your opponent's board with their own Crystal Blaster. That would make this one of my favorite cards. Maybe that's a bit overkill, but let me know what you think. Number 8, Gravity Shift. Gravity Shift is another 5 cost Darkest Action card with a unique effect, although not nearly as cool or practical as Mind Control. It'll give you plus 1000 B power or plus 10 damage, but that's not something you get to decide. Your opponent actually chooses what benefit you get. Unless you're playing against a literal toddler, your opponent isn't going to choose the one you actually need. If you haven't won the round yet, they'll probably pick the damage. If you have won the round, they'll probably pick the B power. The only way this can be 100% beneficial is if you have a damage wins deck. Play Gravity Shift first, and if they choose the damage, play Mac or Mock. Even then, the payout it gives isn't high enough since there are plenty of other cards that give a higher return for lower energy. It's still not a terrible return, but it can still absolutely be better. It's only number 8 because it's not an abhorrent return, and because I really like the power play idea of trapping your opponent into helping you no matter what with damage wins cards. The only real way to fix this card is by increasing the benefits, maybe making it either 1500 B or 15 damage. I would say to lower the cost, but if we do that, then damage wins decks would be even more ridiculous than they already are. Number 7, B. Our first, but certainly not last hero on the list. There's a lot of bad ones, and B is arguably the worst one since there's no actual benefit attached to it, but I'll go over why it's in number 7 soon. B is a 1 cost hero that gives you the ability to flip a core face up. That's it. There's no other benefit. It just lets you know what a core does. You know what else lets you know what a core does? Your fucking memory. Oh, but what about the opponent's cores? What if they have a trap core? No one uses trap cores, you bimbo. And even if they do, they'll place it on your side, so don't land on them. There's no actual use for this card at all. The only reason why it's not higher is because it's only a 1 cost. The way I would fix it is by increasing the cost to 3 and making it to where if you land on the core you flipped, you get a plus 300B. It's a skill check while giving a nice benefit each round for doing the skill check. Number 6, Leah Battle Brawlers. It's really funny seeing a Leah card on this list after talking about how busted the other Leah cards are in the last one. Leah BB is a ridiculous 10 cost hero card that lets you search the deck for another hero card, and it gives plus 10 to your attacks if you control 5 or more heroes. Look, search cards are supposed to be scarce in this game, but that doesn't mean they warrant a whole 10 cost just to get one, especially when you only get to do it for one card type. The plus 10 to attacks is fine, I guess, but it needs a 5 hero requirement, which isn't too common unless you're running hero decks. But of course, they couldn't make the effect too good, since it only gives plus 10 to your attacks and not the Bakugan's actual damage, so you can't pair it with damage wins. Really, the effects you get aren't bad, but the absurd costs make it impractical at best. You can't really make a deck around it, since by the time you can get Leah out as well as meet the 5 hero requirement, the 10 extra damage per attack won't really matter since it's so late in the game. You can cheese it out with Leah AA or Dan BB, but if you need top tier cards to make a card work, it's probably not a good card. It's higher than the previous cards just because it's extremely difficult to get out, and it gives a subpar payoff if you do play it. The way I would fix it is by lowering the cost to 5, keep the hero search in, and make it to where your Bakugan attacks get +1 for each of your heroes in play. Easier to get out, still has a cool search, and although the secondary effect is typically lower unless you have a hero deck, it will amass more damage added because you're able to play it way earlier. Number 5, Shadow Ambush. Shadow Ambush is a really interesting card because of what makes it bad. It gives a piss poor 5 damage for 3 energy, but if you reveal it from your hand with Sync, it'll give you +2 damage. Nothing too great all around, but is that really a reason why it's this high up? Well, let's just take a look at some of the best Sync cards. See the issue? They say reveal a card that costs 5 or more. Okay, well, there's more Sync cards, aren't there? Sure, let's look at some more. Oh, oh no. I don't know how this is possible, but there's not a single action card that can reveal its Shadow Ambush. The only cards I could find are these two, and only Lightning actually can grant the benefit. The card is completely non-functional unless there's a card I forgot about. There's only one card that activates the secondary effect, and if you do manage to meet this weirdly difficult requirement, congratulations, you get 2 whole fucking damage. I would simply fix it by making it a 5 cost and making it give a better bonus when played. Maybe even bump the reveal bonus as well. Anything to make this card functional. Number 4, Energy Charge. Alright, who's ready for some super stinkers? Energy Charge is a 4 cost action card that gives your opponent a choice like Gravity Shift, but it's somehow worse. It is cheaper, but the choices are way easier for the opponent to choose. They either have to take 4 damage or have 2 of their energy cards destroyed. 4 damage, or lose 2 of your energy cards. Permanently. Is that even a question? Considering this can be played turn 4, 2 energy cards would be half of your energy economy typically. That's an insane disadvantage to have instead of just taking 4 small hits. Would you rather get a slap on the wrist or lose your left leg and your life savings? To be fair, destroying 2 energy cards as a 4 cost is an amazing deal, but when in the hell would your opponent choose that? Unless they're on the verge of death, there's no scenario where they'd pick to destroy 2 of their energy cards. And even then, if they're that close to dying, you should focus on taking the round instead of hoping they'll choose their own death. This is such an interesting concept that I just don't think can work really well. I try to think of a way to fix it, but really, it'll either be really overwhelming or very underwhelming. The best thing I could think of is making the cost a 2 cost and making it only destroy 1 energy card. It makes it fairly worth it either choice they make. 4 damage for 2 energy isn't bad, especially if you take out one of their flip cards, and if you play all 3, that's 12 damage done, which can be enough pressure for the opponent to be tempted to destroy an energy instead of the damage. But maybe that's a bit much. Like I said, this card is difficult to balance. Maybe make it one of those cards that give your Bakugan a Victor ability to trigger the effect so it's harder to actually pull. Not too sure. Let me know if you have an idea down below. For some reason, dealing straight damage is really overvalued in many cards, which is weird since Quickfire costs nothing at all. There's not a single better example of that than the number 3 spot. Number 3, Duran Dane. Okay, when I was making this list, I thought it was a 9 cost, which is bad enough, but it's a fucking 11 cost. What the fuck? Anyway, another hero, Yippee. Like I said, this whale motherfucker costs 11 energy to play. For 11 energy, this card better do my laundry and suck my willy. Unfortunately, all this card does is be a giant disappointment. It does 5 damage to your opponent upon playing it, and your Bakugan have double strike. That's it? That was just a glorified BR Dan. Okay, Bakugan, let's go by your weird way of valuing effects. The cost of giving all your Bakugan double strike is 4 energy, since BR Dan does exactly that. And we saw with energy charge that 4 damage is worth 4 energy, apparently. So 5 damage would be worth around the same. At most, this card should cost 9 energy. So why in the hell is it an absurd 11 energy? It doesn't help that this card doesn't stack well, since Double Strike doesn't stack. It would have been better if this card just gave damage to all your Bakugan instead, so you could actually stack Duran, which is exactly what I would do. I would make it an 8 cost that still does 5 damage, but gives all your Bakugan plus 3 damage. It wouldn't be as good as Double Strike, but would be easier and more worthwhile to stack. Number 2, Vice Cutter. This might be the only card that actively harms you. It's a 4 cost action card that gives 500 B and 5 damage, but only if you destroy one of your gears. Wow. Do you remember how on the Power 9 I talked about how great gears are and how the majority of good cards are gears? So why in the hell would you destroy one of them for a small 5 damage? The only way I can imagine this card was made is that someone forgot how gears work and thought they were making something cool. Dude, what if you want to put on a different gear? I know, I'll make a card that destroys a gear for you. I'm so smart. If you want to put on a new gear, you can do that without destroying the gear already on. It just goes in the discard pile. Even if you destroy a low cost gear, 4 energy for 500B and 5 damage is purely average. You're better off keeping the gear, saving your energy, and putting in better cards than this garbage. It's not number one since it gives an average payout, even if the cost is dumb. The way I would fix it is by lowering the cost to 3 and making it to where instead of just getting 5 damage, you gain the B power bonus and the damage bonus that the gear gave. The way to use this is as a panic button, where if you have a great gear on a different Bakugan but not on another Bakugan, use Vice Cutter to give the power of the gear for a round if you really need it. Even then, it's pretty meh. Now for some dishonorable mentions. These cards are also really bad, but didn't make it on the list because they're either boring to talk about or not as bad as the others. Bakugan's new trick, Chaos Divine, and Shadow Bash. Bakugan's new trick is just a terrible flip with a terrible exchange. Chaos Divine is an overpriced energetic decay with a dumb restriction, and Shadow Bash is another overpriced damaging card, but at least it makes the opponent discards cards. Hey, you want to know what else does 2 damage to your opponent? 2 quick fires. Now that we went over some of the biggest losers in the Bakugan TCG, you gotta wonder, what can be worse than that? And really, I would ask the same question if the answer wasn't obvious. I dare you guys to make a list with a lot of the cards on this list, especially the number 1 card. Number 1, Max. It's not a secret by now that expensive cards aren't typically good. And while Max isn't the most expensive card on this list, it's essentially throwing your energy in the garbage and shitting on it. Max causes all opposing Bakugan to have 3 less damage. Not a great effect by any means, but I could see how stacking it could be a pain in the ass. But good luck stacking it because you need 27 whole energy to get 3 out. And not only that, but Max fucking kills himself when you take damage. He gets so depressed that he couldn't negate all the damage that he falls on a sword face first. I get that this card was made when Bakugan weren't doing half your deck worth of damage, but spending 9 energy just to get your card destroyed has got to be the worst feeling ever. Yeah, sure, you could cheese it out, but like I said, if you need really good cards to get another card to not suck ass, it sucks some hard ass. How do you fix it, you ask? Easy. Remove the self destruction effect entirely, or if you want to keep it, make it a 3 cost. It could be obnoxious, but even a quick fire gets rid of them. And if you don't have a Bakugan that does more than 3 damage, your team is dog shit. And that's the end of the list. I'm sure it's not as interesting as the Power 9, but I hope you enjoyed regardless. And if you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing. These lists are a ton of fun to make, and I hope you have just as much fun watching them. I plan on making a lot more different kinds of lists, covering the TCG and the franchise as a whole. Speaking of which, make sure you leave your opinion on what the most underrated Bakugan is. I'll be sure to include your answer if I agree with your suggestion. And I want to say thank you so damn much for the support you've been giving. I hit 35 subs at the time of recording this, and that's so much more than I thought I'd get in the few videos I made. It's also insane I have 2 videos with over 1K views. It's honestly a good bit of pressure, but that won't stop the fact I love making videos. And shout out to my international viewers. I don't know why, but this graph is funny to me. And that's all from me. To end this video, let's put up a picture of cards better than Max.